What's going on, guys? It's Jacob from Topside MMA, and today I'm bringing you my locks and traps video for UFC Fight Night Taira versus Park. So let's get right into it. First up, we got, Rafael Estevam versus Felipe Bunes. Now, this is a medium confidence pick for me just because we know there's such a clear path for Estevam to win here. We know he has the wrestling advantage. We know Felipe has struggled with that in the past, and he should be able to dominate these first two rounds. The only thing that worries me just a tad from Estevam here is that he's coming onto this fight with a little bit of short notice. He hasn't had a full camp to really train for this. It's been long enough. I think he's had like 4 or 5 weeks to prepare, so it's not super short notice, but it's close enough to where it could be a concern for you, especially because his game plan relies on his cardio, and we know he starts to slow down in the third rounds, so that does have just a slight tad bit of concern for me. That's why I don't have him as a high confidence pick. But at the same time, we know Bunes, he also starts to slow down as fights progress, and he's never had a third round finish before, so that does make me a lot more confident in Estevam, where at least if he's taking this with not as full cardio as normal against a guy like Felipe, I don't think he's going to be able to submit Estevam. That's his only way to win this. Estevam should be able to win the first 2 rounds on the scorecards. The third round might be a toss-up if he can't land the takedowns, but I don't think his BJJ is lacking to the point where Felipe Bunes is going to be able to submit him. So for that reason, he's a medium confidence pick. Next up, we got Rodriguez versus Souza. Now, I like Rodriguez in this fight. I think she should be able to land the takedowns and dominate this fight on the ground. The striking on the feet should be relatively competitive, but I just think Rodriguez should have the fight IQ to at least take it to the ground. The reason why this is a low confidence pick is because we have seen Rodriguez's fight IQ not hold up. We saw her get DQ'd for headbutting a girl. So you can't have a ton of confidence that she's going to be able to just run right through Souza and she sticks to a perfect game plan, because we've seen her not do that in the past. So you can't assume she will in this fight, but she has the path to go there. I think this fight is definitely closer than the odds suggest. If Souza is able to keep this on the feet, she's dangerous. She has more power in the hands. She's going to probably have the slight edge on the feet. I just think, Rodriguez should be able to take it to the ground. We've seen Souza struggle on the ground before. That's the clear path for her to win. She should win that way, but we don't know exactly. Rodriguez is a bit of a kind of a crash out, not really thinking her way through fights, kind of just going right through like a bully. So low confidence pick, but very high up on the low confidence tier. You know what I mean? Like, she should win this fight. But anyway, next up, we got Elves Brener versus Estaban Ribovics. Now, I like Ribovics a lot in this because of his striking abilities. He's going to be the much more well-rounded striker. He's going to have a lot more higher volume. The damage is probably close. Brener can land some haymakers if he throws them. We've seen Ribovics hurt before, but his recoverability is really good for Ribovics, that is. He has such a high pace that he pushes with cardio. He's able to land 100+ strikes easily without even trying in fights. So as long as he can keep this on the feet, he should have a clear advantage. He should be able to dominate on the feet. The only thing that worries me is that Brener does have the takedown abilities. We saw him win scrambles against Mitsubek Oralbai, which kind of put a little bit of concern in my head, because I'm thinking, all right, he's training with the shoot-a-box guys. Hopefully they have a game plan for him that, all right, standing on the feet, we know that's not our best path. The best path for Brener here is to take it to the ground, and we've seen Esteban lose. When he lost against Loic, he was able to land a bunch of takedowns against Esteban Ribovics, so the path is there for him to beat Ribovics. Their path is there for Brener to land the takedowns, control him on the ground, and neutralize that dangerous striking that Esteban Ribovics has. So for that reason, I can't put him as a really high confidence pick, but at the same time, you got to go with Ribovics just because the striking won't even be close. He should be able to land a lot more volume. I don't think Brener's striking is terrible. I want to give him some credit here, but I just think Esteban Ribovics, the volume, the pressure, that like the pace that he pushes in his fights, it's going to be a whole nother level compared to Brener. So as long as he can keep it on the feet, he should be able to win this clear as day. Maybe he gets a finish, maybe he doesn't. I could see it being a late KO or a decision, but as long as Ribovics can keep it on the feet, he should win this fight. Next up, we got a high confidence pick, Tatsuro Taira versus HyunSung Park. I like Taira a lot in this. He's been training for the 5-round fight, whereas Park is taking this 5-rounder on short notice. Park doesn't have the experience that Taira has. Taira just fought Royval, went to a split decision. I think everything is pointing towards Taira in this. He's a high IQ fighter. Taira knows his grappling is his best attribute, and he knows that when he fought Royval, he wasn't trying to get slick and cute on the feet. He wanted to dominate on the ground. Sometimes he wasn't able to really do so. There were times where he was looking a bit shaky. He got rocked a couple times on the feet. And I think Park does have a decent amount of power to maybe he could rock Taira. I just don't see it going that way. I think Taira has great heart. He has great cardio. He has great durability. He has great ground game. It should be enough to beat a guy like Park. So I like him a lot, especially with the whole short notice step up thing for Park. I know he was training for Steve Erceg, but a short notice 5-rounder. Everything points to Taira in this one. I almost had him as a lock, but he's just below that. I like him almost like a lock, but do a high confidence pick for him. Next up, we got Nick Klein versus Pulyaev. What's his damn name? Andrey Pulyaev. That's his first name. I like Nick Klein in this one. If you went and look at my underdogs video, my dog watch video that I did yesterday, I just dropped it. I like Nick Klein for a variety of reasons. The stats all point towards him. Now, the stats are very limited in the sense that they're only across one fight, so you can't really put a ton of weight onto those stats. But if you go and look at them, every single stat completely shines towards Nick Klein. It's not even close. They're not even remotely close. So I like Nick Klein in this one. I think he should be able to get the ground game going. I think he should get some control time. Maybe he doesn't necessarily land a bunch of takedowns because we've seen Pulyaev have decent takedown defense, but I think if he's going to be able to just control him against the cage, that should be enough to win Nick Klein minutes. And we just haven't seen Pulyaev tested. Who knows? Nick Klein could easily go in here and land a submission. He could easily get to the back if he really comes out explosive in round one. The only thing that worries me about Nick Klein is his cardio. He does start to slow down as the fight progresses. So I think he's going to look his best early on. If this goes into the third round, it might be a little bit more tricky just because, Pulyaev probably will have the most success in that third round if it gets there, just because that's when Klein's not going to be as explosive with the wrestling and the grappling. And, I could see this being a 29-28 decision going either way, depending on how Nick Klein is able to keep that pace going on into the second round. I don't think Pulyev's all that dangerous. I'm not super worried about him chinning Klein early like we saw against Mansur, and even that was the second round. So I like Klein in this. Pulyaev just hasn't been able to look decent anywhere in the UFC so far. In his fight against Christian Leroy Duncan, he looked like garbage the entire fight. He did not look great at all. You could say maybe he had decent takedown defense, but CLD was just trying to hold him against the cage. Whereas Nick Klein, he won the first round against Mansur Abdul Malik, and he looked damn good in that first round. He took the fight on short notice too, so yeah, he gassed out in the second. He got rocked, he got KO'd by a dude who has insane knockout power. You can't blame him for that. So for all those reasons, I like Nick Klein a lot in this one. I'm not going crazy on it because it's still low-level MMA. You know what I mean? Like, you can't be super confident either way in this fight. I just think everything's pointing towards Klein, especially as an underdog. I think he's the value here for the pick this week. So I got him as a low-confidence one, but I do like Nick Klein this week. Next up, we got Karol Rosa versus Nora Cornolle. This is kind of a similar boat where it's like I'm not super confident in Nora Cornolle, but I am leaning her slightly in this one. It's not for the same reasons as Nick Klein and Pulyaev, but I just think Cornolle has a little bit more of that dog to her. I think she's going to fight more. I think she's going to really go out there and go for it. We see Rosa, she goes to every single fight she's had. They're all decisions. They're all decisions. She's not finishing anyone at this level. So you're really going to take a minus, I don't know what she's at now, like 180, somewhere around there, favorite in a fight that's likely going to a decision. Nora's going to be landing the bigger shots. If anyone's having the big moments, they're going to be going for Cornolle. So I'm like, I don't want to have that type of action on someone like Rosa where when she's on, she looks good, but if she's cold, if she's timid against a girl like Cornolle, that's going to look really bad for her on the scorecards. I expect this to go over because both of these girls are pretty durable, but Cornolle is dangerous. She has finishes. I don't think she's necessarily going to be able to finish a Rosa. I think this has split decision written all over it. So for that reason, I can't be super confident in her ability. But as an underdog pick, I think she's worth it. I just think Cornolle is more that crazy big moment winner. And on scorecards, I think that'll matter a lot. So give me Cornolle, but not very confident. Next up, this is the lock of the card. We got Kevin Vallejos versus Danny Silva. I am a huge Kevin Vallejos fan. I love Kevin Vallejos for so many damn reasons. He is just an insane prospect in the UFC. He has great striking. He has great cardio. He has great durability. We've seen him tested against really high-level competition. He took a round off of Gene Silva in his UFC or Contender Series debut. They went to war in that fight, and he was able to go all 3 rounds. Not even that. He won the first round, and he outstruck Gene Silva clear as day. He was the more technical striker. He outlanded him. Gene Silva's antics weren't able to get through him. It was insane how well he did in that fight. And if the second round, Gene Silva definitely won because he landed some big shots later in that round. But that third round was very, very competitive. Gene Silva had a couple moments where he was like landing just the more like heavy shots. Like you could tell the power difference for Gene Silva is just, I mean, compared to anyone he's fighting, Gene Silva is going to be more powerful. But in that fight, it was just like, he had his moments, but it was like, it was so close in that third round to where if Vallejos would have landed a couple power shots, you know, like maybe if he had one or two big moments in that round to really kind of weigh the judge's scorecard, I could have seen that being a split decision. It was just Gene Silva barely edged out that third round with a couple more heavy shots. Vallejos had a little bit more damage worn on him, so it makes sense. It was a clear 29-28, but for him to look that good at 21 years old, I think the sky is the limit for this kid. He's only 23 now. I'm like, oh my God, who knows where this kid's going to go? Kevin Vallejos just keeps looking better and better. He's running through guys. And you look at Danny Silva, and it's like he's going to split decisions with guys that got cut from the UFC. He got outstruck by Josh Kulibau. He won a split decision barely. I think people do underestimate Silva a little bit in the sense of, if Silva had a different matchup, I like Danny Silva. You know, I think he can do good in the UFC. You know, he's reaching his physical prime, so I think he's going to keep looking better and better. I just think this is the worst, or one of the worst possible matchups he's had. You know, like it's just, I don't see a reality in which he wins this fight unless he turns into some Marab and he just goes super wrestling crazy. And even then, we've seen Vallejos was able to stop takedowns from Gene Silva, who's way more explosive and strong than Danny Silva. Danny Silva has no knockout power in his hands. He has no real strength, the real explosiveness that's going to knock Kevin Vallejos. So if anyone's getting hurt, Danny Silva is going to be the one getting hurt. I think Vallejos is the better striker. He has more power. His cardio is better. He has better durability. I mean, like every single thing is going for Kevin Vallejos in this. I think his future is much more bright. And yeah, I love Kevin Vallejos in this one. I'm going heavy on him this week. Kevin Vallejos, I think I would predict a knockout. Could go to a decision. We've never seen Silva finished before, but when Kevin fought Cam Teague had never been finished before either, and look what happened to him. It was under half a round he got knocked out. So I would not go for the over in this fight. I think Kevin Vallejos most likely knocks him out in a brutal fashion. But either way, he could get a submission, he could get a decision. Either way this fight goes, I got Kevin Vallejos all day. Lock it in this week. Very confident in that. Next up, we got Nakamura versus Fletcher. Now, this one, I have it as a medium confidence pick just because Nakamura has the wrestling advantage, and we've seen Fletcher struggle with the takedowns. We saw in his fight against Calvin Loughran that he was just not able to withstand the takedowns. Calvin Loughran landed 6 takedowns on Fletcher, and it did not look good. You know, Loughran is not that guy, or not that good of a fighter. He got cut from the UFC, whereas Rinya Nakamura, he's been wrestling his entire life. That's his bread and butter. And, you know, he didn't really implements it in his last fight, which was very, I don't even know the right word, not even upsetting, but like concerning. Like, you're not sticking to what you're good at. I don't know for whatever reason he did that, because his striking did not look good. He's just one of those guys where he's a freak athlete who's trying to go from wrestling to MMA. Who knows where this guy's cap is? I'm not super high on him, honestly. I just don't love what I've seen from him. He's been able to beat up worse opponents at lower levels, but I think the second he starts to really ramp up his level of competition, like even when we saw him against Gafrovitz, he got it, I would say, exposed in that fight. So I don't think Nathan Fletcher is a bad fighter. I think Nathan Fletcher is definitely going to be the weaker fighter. The strength should be night and day different for him. Nakamura, if he has the true wrestling to where he's so strong and he can implement it, and he actually chooses to go for the wrestling, he should be able to dominate Nathan Fletcher on the ground. He's going to be bigger and stronger, the better wrestler. We've seen Nathan Fletcher struggle with the wrestling against a lesser opponent in the past, so everything is pointing for Nakamura. This is more so just a fight IQ type of thing. Like, does Nakamura go for the takedowns? Yeah, he probably does look like a minus 500. But if you're playing him at minus 500, when we've seen he just threw that game plan away in his last fight, and he proved that his fight IQ is a major problem, I don't know how you can trust him here. So I definitely am not trusting him here. Stick around towards the end of this video. I'm going to have a little bit of a switch up with this one, but we'll get to that when we get there. But next up, oh, wait, switch back over. Boom. Next up, we got Piera versus Gore. Now, Rodolfo Vieira, I like him to win this fight just because Tresean Gore hasn't been able to really shine in the UFC so far. He's gotten a couple, I don't want to say lucky, but He's gotten some guillotine wins, but I just think against a guy that's such a high-level grappler like Rodolfo Vieira, he's not going to get some random lucky guillotine, some freak guillotine out of nowhere. Vieira should be able to avoid any type of trap like that. And I think he should be able to land the takedowns on a guy like Gore. I had this in my underdogs video where I talked about how Gore does have good takedown defense. 2 for 12, it's a 86% takedown defense. So that does have me worried here, because if this does get to the ground, if this was a grappling match, this would be a lock for Vieira. But it's MMA. A lot of things can happen. Gore has more power in his hands. And if anyone's going to get a knockout, it probably would be Gore. So you can't have a ton of confidence in this one, just because it's kind of like whoever can control where this fight goes likely wins. So I do think Vieira should have the grappling ability upside in the wrestling to take a guy like Gore down, but it's going to be a war either way. It could go any which direction. I just think if Vieira, let's say if Vieira gets to Gore's back, it's probably over. It's probably he's going to submit him. Whereas if Gore rocks Vieira, there's a chance Vieira can recover. There's a chance he could shoot a takedown, land a takedown, recover, get back in the fight, survive. Maybe he loses that round, but he's still in it, kind of like we saw against like Brundage, So I think there's a little bit more upside for Vieira in that sense, as Vieira just needs one takedown in one dominant position, and he just needs to get on his back one time throughout this fight, and it's over. Whereas Gore, if he rocks Vieira, it's not necessarily over. He would have to continue to put in the work, and you have to go for that knockout, and maybe it gets to the ground, and then Gore follows Vieira to the ground after he rocks him, and then he gets caught up in the sub. Anything can happen. It's very risky, so I'm leaning Vieira in this one, but I'm not extremely confident. That's why I have him a little bit lower in the medium confidence section, but that does it for this one. Next up, we got Ribovics versus Duncan. Now, I like Mateusz Ribovics a lot in this one. I think he is all around better than Chris Duncan in every single aspect of MMA, minus maybe front guillotine chokes. I think that's all Chris Duncan probably has going for him. And the reason why I put this as a high confidence pick is because I feel like I've had a good read on Chris Duncan throughout his UFC career. I picked him to beat Jordan Vucenic because I thought Vucenic was a bit of a fraud. So I picked Chris Duncan there. And, I think that was a good underdog spot for me that I'm kind of proud of. And I like that. I feel like I've been able to have a good read on him. I picked him against Balaji Oki too, because I figured Balaji Oki is just not that high level of a fighter. Someone like Chris Duncan can be a little bit more crafty, and I think he could expose Oki's weaknesses, and that's exactly what he did. So I have a good read on Chris Duncan, and I think he could do well in the UFC. Kind of like a Tresean Gore. I think Gore has gone against a little higher competition, so he's struggled more than a guy like Chris Duncan. But I feel like they're kind of the same. They're all around pretty well-rounded. They're just not elite. And once they go against guys that are either extremely strong in one area or just all around a lot more well-rounded than them, they're going to struggle. So I think this is the perfect example for Ribovics. I think he's just all around the more well-rounded fighter. The only thing that concerns me with Ribovics is his cardio. We know he starts to slow down the longer that fights go on. But the thing is I just don't know if that's going to be a real issue in this fight. I don't see it going that long, Ribovics going to be the better striker. He's going to have the better wrestling. He should have the better ground game. Although it could be close. I think he should have the edge here anywhere this fight goes, as long as he doesn't death gas in the third round. But we've seen Duncan get cracked before. Slaviklaus put him out early in the second round of their fight. So I don't know. I just see Ribovics likely getting a knockout here, man. We saw what he did to Orbal's face. He broke his orbital bone in the first round. It was disgusting. And I think a guy like Duncan, who's had durability issues in the past, Ribovics should probably be too much of an early powerful force early on in this fight. And I think he gets Chris Duncan out of there. I like him a lot in this. So next up, we got Neil Magny versus Dos Santos. I like Neil Magny in this one. I'm kind of pick flipping with Magny. I'm going back and forth on this one. If you watch my underdogs dog watch video I just posted yesterday, I go a lot more in depth on this fight and why I'm starting to move towards Magny. So go watch that one for the full breakdown. But I don't know. I just think for a pick'em odds, I think Magny is looking worse. His last 5, he's 1-4 or something, because he's going against killers, man. Whereas Dos Santos, yeah, he's gone against killers, but they're not the same level. I'm not putting Carlos Prates as the same level as a Chidi Nkwani. You know what I mean? There's a difference in the competition level. So for that reason, I'm slightly leaning Magny. I know he has the reach that I talked about too. There's different factors for the stats too that lean towards Magny, and where these guys have so much experience and the stats actually do play more of a they have more of weight for me in my decisions, because there's so much data to go off of. I'm leaning towards Magny in this one. I think he's a good dog value, but these guys are getting older. They've had durability issues in the past, so anything could happen. So I'm not super confident in this, but I am leaning with Magny in this one, just ever so slightly. So I might go back and forth on this one. I'll have my final picks in my weigh-in recap video on Friday or tomorrow. But anyway, that does it for this one. Last up, we got, boom, Austin Bashi versus John Giannis. Austin Bashi is a lock this week. I know I got a little sad face down with the traps at the bottom. Don't have any traps this week, but stay around, just wait a couple seconds. I got something lined up. But Austin Bashi, I like him a lot this week. We've seen Giannis. He struggled with the submission defense. He got subbed out by a guy in the last couple fights. He got rocked by Cameron Smotherman, who struggled against grapplers and wrestlers in the UFC level. And I just don't think he's going to have anything to really test Austin Bashi's abilities here. We've seen Austin Bashi go against high-level competition. He would have beaten C-Rod if he had not gassed out. And C-Rod's beaten a ton of upcoming prospects who I all think would run through Giannis. So, yeah, I've looked through Giannis' tape. Nothing really impressed me at all. Short notice UFC debut step up against a guy like Austin Bashi, who's been proven to hang with high-level competition. Almost won that. Lost to 29-28. I think Austin Bashi gets to him. He takes his back. He's going to submit Giannis early on. I don't know if this gets out of the second round. Could go to a decision. I would be surprised. I think Austin Bashi is going to backpack him, get a rear naked choke, and get this man out of there inside 2 rounds. That's how I see it. I'm very confident in Austin Bashi. I like him a lot. He's a really good upcoming prospect who's looked great so far. And it's kind of like Kevin Vallejos. It's like they look great. I don't think Austin Bashi is on the same level of Kevin Vallejos in terms of how I like them. I think Kevin Vallejos he's Gene Silva 2.0. But anyway, Austin Bashi's looked great. I like him a lot. I think he's going to do great in the UFC as long as he can get that cardio up a little bit. But a guy like Giannis, where he's showing up on short notice, a week's notice for this fight, Austin Bashi's going to have his way with him. So give me Austin Bashi as a lock. Now, I know I didn't have any traps for this card, and honestly, I don't really think there are any big traps. As everything I talked about, there are some potential issues, like with Estevam, if his cardio is a problem, that could be an issue. But just for the video's sake, I wanted to do one trap. So if I had to do one fight to be the trap for this card, I would do Nakamura versus Fletcher, because I think Fletcher is being underestimated. He's a good, well-diverse MMA fighter. He's had success in the Cage Warrior scene. He's looked good there. He's just not anything great. He's a good fighter, not a great fighter. And I think he's well-rounded enough that if this stays on the feet, he should be the better striker than Nakamura. He has decent wrestling himself. He's kind of he's crafty in the scrambles. He's good on the ground and scrambling wise. Maybe Nakamura, yeah, he should have the large advantage in the wrestling, but if they're really going for scrambles on the ground, I think Nathan Fletcher could have some success on the BJJ wise. I think Fletcher could land a submission here. He has good submission abilities, but it's tough. The reason why I'm putting this as a trap, if I had to pick one, is just the odds and the fight IQ. We've seen Nakamura throw fight IQ just clean out the window. We've seen him abandon what he's good at, not even try. He didn't even, if he would have shot 0 for 30 takedowns, cool. You're trying what you're good at. You just didn't work. You had an off day. He didn't even try, and that's the thing that really bothers me. He just doesn't seem like one of those guys that is a very high level IQ fighter. And for these type of odds, I just find it hard to get behind that. Whereas a guy like Estevam, we know he is going to stick to that wrestling game plan. His striking's terrible. He knows that. We know it. So he is going to stick to what he's good at. Rafael Estevam likes to keep it on the ground with the wrestling. We know he's going to do that. Sure, he's had cardio problems where he's gassed out a little bit towards the end of the fight, but that's not a fight IQ thing. That's just the cardio thing that he can work on. Whereas something like a fight IQ with Nakamura, we've seen him really just struggle to implement a game plan and deal with the adversity. He just hasn't been able to prove that. Whereas at least with Nathan Fletcher, I think his fight IQ is going to be a lot higher. He's more well-rounded overall. It's just the wrestling difference is why Nakamura is such a heavy favorite. And I think if Nakamura sticks to the game plan, he probably does look like a minus 500 favorite in the wrestling. As long as he doesn't get into some BJJ scrambles against Nathan Fletcher and they're reversing each other, and that'll have everyone nervous. But if he just sticks to the wrestling, doesn't go for submissions, just goes for a dominant position, he should be able to win this fight. But considering he's a minus 500, I will, if I had to pick a trap, it's that, just for that reason alone. So I didn't want to have this video go with no trap, but realistically, I think all of these lines, a lot of them make sense. And the underdogs, they have a lot of good reasons for them too. So I think this card doesn't have a ton of like huge traps. But anyway, guys, that does it for this video for the locks and traps for UFC Fight Night Taira versus Park. So thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said, I'm going to have more videos coming later this week, so make sure y'all stay tuned for those. It's been your boy Jacob from Topside MMA. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see y'all soon. Peace.